Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Polititeam Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ray Hennessy, and today we're joined with Brett Crawford. Brett Crawford is known for his artistic work in the LA area. His works span a large medium and means of art, such as from painting to sculpting to even creating custom motorcycles. That being said, he also is an advocate for prison reform and has been someone who has gone through the system, seen what it's like, and wants to see change for the better. Brett, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me on. It's always important for me to any chance I get to be able to talk about, in this case, we'll be talking about primarily incarcerated firefighters, but also just talking about prison reform and changing the way the criminal justice system is and how we deal with people who get arrested and how they transition back into the community.
Right. So I think it's important for our viewers to understand kind of your background. How'd you get into this? Why are you interested in it? The incarcerated firefighting mainly.
Right. Okay. Do you mind if I don't mind telling you my age? I'm 57, and how old are you?
I'm 20.
20. Okay. To put it into context, so I started getting in trouble when I was kind of young. I was raised by some kind of knucklehead. My stepfather and his brothers were kind of like really rough men who knocked me around when I was young, and I used that as an excuse to kind of just be like a wildling. And so I started getting in trouble when I was in my teens, and then I went to prison when I was 19 years old. So my first time going to prison, I was 19. I went for 3 years, and I traveled up the state from Los Angeles, from Chino Prison to Tehachapi Prison to Folsom Prison to San Quentin Prison, back down to Folsom, back down to Tehachapi, and then out to CMC, which is California Men's Colony. And that was all on my first day at 19 years old. So when most kids, or not kids, young men are going to college, trade school, the military, I was in prison learning how to be a better criminal, and I don't know that that's the case. I can't speak and say that that's the case for everybody. And I always like to say in the beginning of talking about this stuff is that I don't speak for the guys who were wrongly accused or have exaggerated sentences, like guys who are in there doing 10 years for a small bag of weed, or people who are innocent their case was, went through the system and it was wrong. Every time I went to prison, I did a crime. I knew the consequences of doing the crime to go to prison, and I still did it. And most of my cases, the majority of my cases were like drugs, doing drugs, selling drugs, theft, car theft, things like, just kind of like grimy drug addict, thief type stuff. So, but when I went in, and I feel like it's the case for not everybody, but a big majority of people who go to prison, is you go in and there's not a lot of, especially nowadays, a lot of like rehabilitation programs in prison, or even education programs in prison. And so you get in there and the only thing you're learning is how to be a better criminal, or how to be a harder person, because prison's not designed for the weak. So it's gonna toughen you up, and it's not gonna make you a more empathetic person, or a more person who cares about what happens to the next guy. And so the case, I think the way we got to this conversation, you and I talking, is I made a comment on a New York Times article on Instagram about incarcerated firefighters.
Yeah, that's one of the major reasons we decided to reach out to you when we read that. And
right. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, please.
No, go ahead, brother.
Yeah, it's interesting because especially now with the California wildfires still going on, it's a really pertinent topic. Exactly the role of incarcerated firefighters. I know it's been pretty controversial exactly what their role is, whether they're being exploited or not is a term that some people will use, whether they're being fairly compensated. And it was very interesting hearing your views on it, if you could possibly reiterate them.
Sure.
What they are.
I mean, I think that comment, I didn't realize that comment was going to blow up the way it did and have such a huge reaction from people. And it really did show the split. And I feel like it's kind of separated in big and little groups. The biggest group is what I feel is like the appropriate group. We're so grateful for these guys working their asses off, helping us fight these tragic fires. We're so grateful for their service. They're heroes, just like civilian firefighters are. And then there's a smaller group of folks who rightfully bring up the 13th Amendment and how although there's a lot of great came from the 13th Amendment, there's a fundamental flaw within the 13th Amendment that allows for prisons to use inmates as basically like a slave workforce. And that goes way back to when the 13th Amendment was written. And different states have different approaches to this, where they've rewritten legislation where the prisons have to pay inmates a certain amount of money. And California pays more than some states and less than other states. And I know this to be true because my experience as an inmate firefighter started in Utah State Prison. So along my road to doing 18 years total time in prison, where it was like, I didn't do 18 years straight. I was on a lifer, what they call it, I was doing a life sentence on an installment plan, 3 years here, 4 years there, 2 years here. And 4 of the years I did, or really a little over 4 of the years I did in Utah State Prison. And they had a very unique program where they had inmate hotshots. So in the ranking of firefighters, there's the smoke jumpers. These are the crazy people who, when a lightning strikes, they jump out of an airplane with a parachute. They try to put it out the fire before it ever becomes a fire.
Oh.
The second most advanced are the hot shots, which is what I was. We'll either hike into a fire or helicopter into a fire, create the hell attack for the helicopters to land, hike to a fire, which can be anywhere from, I don't think most people realize how insanely physical wildland firefighting is. You carry a 60-pound pack, you're carrying a 15-pound Pulaski, which is like an axe with a hoe on the end of it. You have all your water, all your fire protection gear, you're wearing full clothing, and you have to hike anywhere from 2 to 10 miles to the fire, and then you start working. And that's not just for inmates, that's for civilians. So I want to say in the very beginning of this that I do agree that all firefighters, especially wildland firefighters, should be paid more. I think the structure firefighters are paid well. I'm sure some of them will argue they should be paid more, which I'm always for more money for firefighters. But the wildland firefighters, I definitely think they should be paid more and be recognized, probably more than they are. And so anyway, I was in Utah. In Utah, I was there from 1994 to 1998 while this program was going on. That program has now transitioned into a civilian hotshot firefighter crew called Lone Peak. But they paid us minimum wage, which was like $7 an hour back then. And it allowed for people to have extra money to buy food from the canteen. And some of the guys were smart and saved their money for when they got out, which ideally, if we were to be able to raise the wage for inmate crews in California, that would be the ideal, is that they would make some money, save the money, have a nest egg for when you get out. Because what I think most people don't understand, that I think California is on the high end of it. When you get out of prison, you get $200 and a kick in the butt, and it's like, good luck. And in a lot of cases, in my case, and the guys who are in there have been like wildlings out there, burning bridges and screwing over their family, this isn't for everybody, but in my case, I had burnt all the bridges I had. I didn't have anybody really but myself and my sister, and so you're out with $200 and no more education, no more rehabilitation, no idea how to do anything better than what you did before. And so going back to the divide, there's the big group who is appreciative of the firefighters. There's a smaller group that is the 13th Amendment folks talking about, they call it legal slave labor. Mm-hmm. And then there's a smaller group of people who are like, they're prisoners, they deserve it, they don't deserve anything. And that's the really small kind of fringe group that says, you did a crime, you should be punished, you shouldn't get anything, you're lucky to be walking on free soil. And I would say to those folks, 95% of the people who go to prison are going to get out within 2 to 5 years. I mean, 1 to 5 years, really. And if you don't teach them, if you don't make programs that teach them a different way, they're going to get out and they're going to hurt themselves, they're going to hurt their family, and they're going to hurt the community. And I hope that for those small group of people who say you should just be punished and not taught anything, that it's not their family or it's not them that gets hurt by someone who has no idea how to live in society without learning. And I had to learn. Like right now I have, you were talking about being an artist. I'm lucky I can be an artist and stuff like that. But for years, I only could see myself through the lens of this kind of like menace and a villain and a drug addict and a thief. It just kind of become like who I was, and I couldn't see past it. There was no future for me. I was never going to be anything other than that, and that was it. And I got lucky when I was 40 years old. Actually, I was 38 years old. No, 40 years old. Now I'm going to have to go back to my memory 17 years ago. And Judge Parsons, I always say his name because he's the one who gave me the chance, gave me the opportunity to I was facing 12 more years. I'd stolen another car, and I was a repeat offender, and I was facing 12 years. And he says, look, man, I'm looking at your life. Is this what you want to do for the rest of your life? And I was like, in court, I'm like, no, even though I still couldn't see past it. And I'd been while I was in county jail fighting that case, I got into a program called Choices. And that program was based on a model of another place called Delancey Street Foundation. And he said, there's a really advanced program that's kind of like a school for knuckleheads called Delancey Street Foundation. And you can go there for 2 years, or you can go to prison for 12 years. And I'm not great with math, but I could do that math. So I said, I'll take 2. And I didn't think it was going to work, to be honest. If I'm honest, I'll go there for 2 years and I'll get out and I'll go back on a thing. Because it sounded like a lot better than going to do. I would have done like 6 or 7 years on that 12 years, but 2 is better than that. So I went to Delancey Street. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life, because I can tell you from experience, being an asshole is easy. It takes 0 effort. I mean, we see it every day online. There's nothing you can post where people aren't divided, where there's some nice people and there's some mean people and some assholes who are saying something really awful and negative. That takes 0 effort. But to be kind and empathetic and looking out for the next person and trying to help the next person and being a better version of yourself every day, that takes an enormous amount of effort. And for a person who's been an asshole their whole life, it feels impossible when you first get there. And when I went, I didn't think that I could be anything different, but I started noticing that the other guys around me started communicating better, they started speaking better, they started looking out for other people, they started helping other people. And then I started to believe that I might be able to do that too. So I ended up staying for 5 years. My last 3 years there, I traveled all around the United States talking to judges and DAs, and I'd go back into prisons, do interviews with guys in prison, do talks to other guys, knuckleheads like me, and say, hey man, I know this is how you're living now, but you don't have to live like that way. If you want to come to Delancey Street, we can help you get there. If you can't make it in Delancey Street, we can steer you off to one of the other programs that can help you fix your lives. Because Delancey Street's not for everybody. It's really hardcore. It's really in your face. And they really make you deal with the main focus of your problem, which isn't I'm a drug addict. It's why did you become a drug addict? Why did you become a criminal? Why did you become violent? Why did you become those things? And we talk about those things. And so I stayed for 5 years and I fixed my life. And now I have an amazing life. And so I feel like that I can come from a place that says we need programs like firefighting programs. Not just because it's having someone go out there and fight fires, but my experience was I wanted to go to fight fires. Let me back up. I think most people don't realize how difficult it is to become a firefighter. Like, it's so hard. It's just like being a civilian firefighter. You have to, let me just talk about how hard it is to become a prison inmate. An incarcerated firefighter.
Okay.
The biggest part is you have to get out of general population. You can't be one of the people who committed crazy crimes where they're on protective custody and all the diddy, to use a term the kids are using these days. You can't be a diddy person. You know what I mean? You can't be a diddy person out on the fire line. There's no sex offenders. There's none of those guys, none of the rapists and sex offenders that are out fighting fires. I can tell you that. Secondly, you have to get out of general population. And general population is the main chunk. There's the high security, and then the bulk of people are in general population, which can be the most dangerous part of prison. When you're in maximum security, you rarely get out of your cell. There's not a lot of interaction. You know, it can be very dangerous because that's where a lot of really dangerous people are. But general population is where a lot of the gang stuff is going on, all the racial tension going on, the drugs, all the other wildness that's going on is in general population. And in order to go to fire camp, you have to get your points down to go to minimum. And, you know, if you think, oh, just stay out of trouble, that's fine. Unless someone's trying to steal the things you have, or they're trying to do some other weird stuff, you know what I mean? It can be really trying to try to stay out of fights, stay out of trouble while you're in junior population. So you get past that. Then if you get on minimum security, then you write and say, I want to go to fire camp, because it's the best. And it's the best part of, if you're going to be incarcerated, being at fire camp is known to be the best part. Because you eat better, you have better food. You're in a situation where you're not around a bunch of people trying to kill each other, because they know if they get into a fight, you get kicked out of fire camp and you go back to general population, or worse. You get to go do something that is physical and good and healthy. And what you don't think about, and what I didn't think about, is how people would treat you once you're out there fighting fires. Mm-hmm. And for someone like me, who's only ever seen himself as a villain or a menace, when we would go out and fight fires, not only the other firefighters in that community, but the people whose homes, property, pets, and lives we help save by putting out fires would treat us like heroes. And I can tell you, as a person who's lived his life as a villain, being treated like a hero made a really big impact on me. And, you know, fighting fires didn't fix my life. Not even you. Did you want to jump in and ask a question?
Yeah, it seems like for some it originally being a firefighter or incarcerated firefighter starts off as something kind of like for your own self gain, because you get better conditions, stuff like that. But then it seems to eventually you get a renewed sense of purpose, or like new aspirations as a result of it. And I was just wondering, you know, what are the motivations for someone in prison to like want to be reformed, for example? Because like you mentioned, it seems like before you got the realizations of that came with being an incarcerated firefighter, you kind of only saw one path for yourself. You just wanted to get the minimum sentences, stuff like that. How did that shift happen? Where you're like, oh, this is something that's, you know, really beneficial and good, and this could give me a new path forward?
I mean, again, I can only speak from my experience. Mm-hmm. And my experience was there was never that when I was in prison, for me. And I know that I don't represent everybody. And I know that there's some guys in there who are inherently good who just got in trouble. I have, I like to use my friend Joey as an example. My friend Joey, who is like your age, and him and his cousin were best friends, and they liked the same girl, and they got in a fist fight like boys do sometimes. Not all boys, but some boys get in fist fights over a girl, and they hugged it out after the fist fight. They both went home, and one of them didn't wake up the next morning.
Oh.
And so Joey, although both sides of the family, because they knew these boys loved each other and were best friends, both families fought to keep him out of prison. And Joey ended up having to go do 5 years in prison, and I was in prison with him fighting fire. So he's the rare exception. He was like, I'm going to get out. I'm going to get a job working construction with my family. My family loves me. I'm going to get out there. It's going to be great. And there's some guys in there that have that. They have family that look out for them, and they have family that love them. And I had family. My sister loved me, and my sister was always there for me. But like, I was on this path to be a criminal, and so I don't represent everybody, but I represent. There's a big majority of guys in there that are very similar to me or worse. I can tell you. And if you don't have an idea how to be a person, like I didn't know how to be a person. I didn't know how to just be like hardworking, honest, kind, put someone else before me, put someone else's time before my own time, care about their well-being. I only cared about how can I get some stuff. I had this giant void in my heart or soul or whatever, where I just needed to keep putting some drugs in there or some stuff that I had. I had to have more stuff. And so there was no, other than not wanting to go to prison again, there was no real motivation for it. And I never wanted to go there. I mean, there is another group of people in there who just get confined to the idea I'm a convict. They're very into that image. It kind of becomes your scene. Just kind of like, we talk about that too, about like homelessness. People are always like, oh, those homeless people should just fix their lives. And it's the same kind of thing, where you're in this situation where you're homeless, you don't know a way out of it. The people you start to get to know, especially in some of these kind of encampments, you start to get to know the people in your community. You have some little community, you have some friends within that, you have some enemies within that, trying to survive that stuff. And it just becomes your scene, and you can't see a way out of it unless someone says, hey, this is how you've been living your whole life. There's another way. And for me, it took going someplace I had a deterrent. I either had to go to do this consequence, was the time, or I had an option to go to this program where I could fix my life. And I needed to be around people like me who had been in trouble, who wanted to fix their lives. So I think that's what it is. You know what I mean? I think that you have to have an example. And for me, the example started in county jail. I was in county jail in this program called Choices, and the program was run by Delancey Street graduates. And that we would have groups, and we'd be talking about things, and we'd be talking to a lady would come in and talk about drug therapy and things like that. And I would listen to that stuff, but I was more into the parts about talking about people's behavior, going into the groups and talking about how people interacted with people, and talking about behavior, and talking about why I made it okay to put poison in my body, and why I made it okay to steal other people's things. I was more into the psychology of fixing my life. And I don't know, unless we figure out a way to start putting those kind of programs in the prisons, or putting education in the prisons, or teaching, even just like, I mean, same thing in college or in high school. There should be programs where you teach people how to open a bank account, how to write a check, not people don't write checks anymore, but how to like use it. Like when I got out of Delancey Street, I'd been in county jail for 2 years, and then I went to Delancey Street for 5 years. And while I was there, cell phones completely changed from like a flip phone into an iPhone. And
Right.
I first got the iPhone, my sister had to teach me how to do it. I had no idea how to do it. And I don't think people understand how stunted people become when they go to prison, and how lost they get, and how if there isn't some kind of transition period, those people are going to be back on the streets, living the only way that they've ever known how to live. And so my hope is that we can figure out ways to continue to add education and add reform to the prison systems.
I'm curious when we talk about the reform. It seems like when you were in prison at the time, the California prison system represented kind of just the idea of like punitive punishment, just like fully for you did the crime, now you got to pay the price for it. While Delancey Street was like the other end, where it was like very focused on reform, restorative justice. Some would say, kind of like restore the person. What was like the culture difference of Delancey Street, or the culture of Delancey, that made it successful, that made it very different from the prison system?
But well, it's never really considered like reform. It's more like education, like how to be a person from the very basics of when you and how to like get out of yourself instead of always going like, oh, poor me, I'm here, I'm doing this program and it's the worst. It's from the very first day you're there. If you go inside and one of your first jobs when you're at Delancey Street is taking care of the dining room and with people who are out doing the different jobs within Delancey Street, because Delancey Street is run entirely by people who've been incarcerated. There's only one person at the very top named Mimi Silbert, who was never a drug addict or never a criminal or never a person off the streets. And everybody there has been through what you've been through. So the moment you get there, you're taught a couple things, and then if someone comes in even 2 hours after you, it's your job to teach them what you've learned in the last few hours. It's a common thing, not a real common, but it should be more common. Each one teach one. And I think people hear that online and you see it in quotes and stuff, but we really do practice the each one teach one. You learn something, you teach it to the next person. And sometimes that comes in the forms of large groups where people are kind of barking at each other and things like that. But most of it is practice. So the goal at Delancey Street isn't practicing being an asshole. The goal is every day practicing being decent and kind and working hard. And there's another philosophy with that called act as if. So if each day you get up, you wake up on time, you make your bed, you brush your teeth, go to work, get to work on time, work hard during the daytime, and if you practice this every day and you act as if you're on time and you act as if you're kind and you act as if you're reliable, after a few weeks or a few months and you're like, I've been acting as if I'm decent, all of a sudden you look around and you're like, I might be becoming decent. You know what I mean? I might be becoming hardworking. I might be becoming reliable, and I am becoming a human. And having of course you're human, but having the traits of a decent human being. And that's the difference. It's holding people accountable, giving people good examples of how to live, giving because if you've been there for a while and you're telling someone who's newer, hey, everybody's kind of equal in that you can call someone on their behavior, whether they've been there for 30 years or if they've been there for one day. Mm-hmm. So if you get there and someone's giving you a lecture about how to show up on time and work hard, and the next day you see them not showing up on time or not working hard, you can tell them about that. Right. So it's this idea of constantly holding each other accountable. And in prison, it's the opposite of that. Mm. You're a little bit rewarded for being an asshole or being the toughest and being the person who cares the least. And I'd say that like the toughest people or the meanest people in prison probably aren't the ones who are picking on the weak, but it'd be like the weaker to mid-weak people who pick on the weak in prison. And in Delancey Street, I would say everybody is trying to help each other get better, whether it's just in the act of saying, oh, you told me to be better, so now I'm going to tell you to be better. And even in your acts of being like, I'll get you back for calling you on your behavior, it helps the other person get better. So it's a constant push to do things to make people better. And I don't, it was never my experience that people in prison were trying to do that. And that doesn't speak for everybody. There's always small groups of people, small to medium groups of people who are in prison who are going to church, They're forming their own AA groups. Sometimes there is a short-lived AA group. When I was in Pelican Bay State Prison, there was a thing called Arts and Corrections where they had a little art program at Pelican Bay, and a guy named Grant Moody started that program, and he had it so that we could go in and an hour once a week, we could go in and paint, which was a really great thing for me. So there's little, I've seen the effect of different programs within the prison work. And I hope, my hope is always that I can say to people, if you don't help people get better, they're going to keep being worse, and they're going to get out and be in our community having a hard time, and their hard time can become your hard time.
You describing kind of the culture of Delancey Street and some of these like some of these programs really reminds me of if you've ever done some form of mixed martial arts. Like I used to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it was this concept
Right.
of like, there'd be a lot of people on different belts and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it was this expectation. It was like a very humbling thing where we all were equal, and that we were all very prone to either mess up a move or maybe do something wrong, and we would call each other out on it, or maybe if you're being a little too aggressive during sparring, stuff like that. And it was like, even if you were like a brown belt or black belt, if you were acting up, it was the duty of basically everyone else. And I think because of that, I was able to kind of elevate the culture a bit and kind of elevate like growth, self-discipline, and things like that. I want to circle back for a second. You a little bit about the art programs that you took. I know at Delancey Street also, I think you met a man named Dugald Sturmer, correct?
Sure. Yeah, Dugald was a part of Delancey Street for a really long time. I wouldn't say that he was he wasn't the mentor who helped me fix my life. Dr. Mimi Silbert and Terry Delane and Stephanie and Jerry, the people who've been there a really long time, were really instrumental in mentoring me. But Dugald was a great artist. He's the greatest illustrator you never heard of. He illustrated for National Geographic and the Smithsonian and a really hugely political magazine called Rampart in San Francisco. And when I went to Delancey Street, so I've been able to draw anything since I was really little. And it was kind of like my only redeeming quality for most of my life. Like I would be an asshole, and the few people that would give me breaks over and over again would, well, he's just a crazy artist. They would just give me passes all the time because I could draw a little bit and paint. And so when I went to Delancey Street, I was like, when can I do art? And Mimi and Terry patted me on the back and said, baby, you already know how to do that. We're going to teach you how to be a human being. And if we teach you how to be a human being, then your art will be better. And so, but I did a couple projects for the president of the San Francisco Giants baseball organization, Larry Bear. And while I was there, Dugald would come by when I was working on those projects and talk to me and ask me, did I want to be an artist? And I said, yeah, I would love it. And he gave me a great piece of advice that I'd like to, if any artists are listening to this, or entrepreneurs really, is he said, don't jump out and try to be an artist. It's going to be very stressful. Being an artist is really hard. Not making the art, that's the fun part, but doing the business of art can be really difficult and stressful. He said, do it as a hobby. He said, get you a job that pays your bills. If you have to get 2 jobs to pay your bills, get 2 jobs, and schedule your art in between. And so that's what I would do. I would get up at 5 a.m, I'd wash my face, I'd work on my art for an hour, I'd go work my 8-hour job as a printmaker, I'd come home, I'd work on my art for an hour, then I'd go wait tables for 4 hours at night, and then I'd start over. And that's how I started building my art career. And then about 3 years into that, I lost my main job. The owner sold the business, and I was faced with the choice of either getting another full-time job or becoming an artist full-time. And I decided to be an artist full-time, and it was awful. I don't want to encourage a bunch of kids to quit their day job and go out and be artists, but it was really hard. I was, 40 at that point. I was 48 years old. I had no CV. I had no gallery representation. Lucky for me that we had social media, which is a big change for artists, I can tell you. But you still have to do the work, and I would go to galleries. Me and my sister every Saturday would go to gallery openings, and I would do it the wrong way, and I'd go up to gallery owners and be like, "Look at my drawings," and they'd be like, "Fuck off! This is someone else's art opening. Get away!" You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then I started doing some stuff that helped build my career. But yeah, Duke was great in that he encouraged me to do art, but he also gave me some great advice about how to do art. And so he died a few years ago, sadly, but made a really big impression on me that I preached to other young entrepreneurs and young artists about, like, pick your thing, have your thing that earns you money, so that you're not stressing out about how to pay your rent. You'll probably still stress about that, but schedule the thing you love in between it, and make sure that you're disciplined within that schedule, so that you do that kind of work. So that you, he said, do it like a crazy, not like a hobby that you do once a week, but like the crazy people who build the big train sets in their garages. You ever seen those guys?
Yeah.
Or the people who have massive shoe collections or massive Lego collections.
They go like
build
all
Legos
out.
Or whatever your thing is. They get really in. He said, be one of those crazy hobbyists. You know, he made fun of, I do it now. I ride my bike every Sunday, but he goes, you know those fellas. He was really cute. He's in his like 80s. He's like, you know those fellas that get on those bikes with those little tight outfits and they ride their bikes 100 miles before they go to work? He said, that's who I want you to be. He said, imagine if you put that kind of time, that kind of effort. Their bikes are $5,000 to $10,000. Their outfits are hundreds of dollars. He said, imagine if you spent that money on your art. Imagine you spent that money on your art supplies, and you put that kind of effort in every day, how great you would be at the end of the year. And so, yeah, he was really important to me. And I missed talking to him. I still talk to several of the people at Delancey Street pretty regularly. I admit, I'm the poster child for rehabilitation. Like, I still have flare-ups in traffic. Still get mad. I still buck authority figures, not all the time, but as far as like fixing my life, I've been clean for 18 years now. I graduated from Delancey Street in 2012. Everything that I have now, I built since 2012, and I have like an amazing life. Like, I own my own home in California, so, near like 2 blocks from the beach. So I don't have to put a number on that for you to understand like what an accomplishment that is. I have a great relationship with my sister, and I have a nice circle of friends, and I have great representation as an artist. And my art career like took off 5 years ago, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that I have an enviable life by anybody's standards. If it wasn't me, I would be envious of me. Like, not to be, that's the truth. Like, I have a really great life. I have a really great career. I have a great circle of friends that I really appreciate. And yeah, it's a good life. And it happened because I was given an opportunity. Some people taught me how to be a person.
Obviously that's a great thing. Very much congratulations for that. It's a very
Thanks.
great thing. But it seems like when you talk about your experiences and stuff, a common motif comes up of like the community that you're surrounded with. Like, even now, you mentioned, like, you have a very good, family structure. You have a very good group of friends, and that seems to be, at least for a lot of people, who you surround yourself with is very important. Whether they're gonna, lift you up, or they're gonna help drag you down, or not help, but drag you down. And I wonder, like, the culture of the prisons, kind of going back to like what's needed in prison reform, is that obviously the kind of the communities that are created sometimes in prison, you mentioned, are like the gang systems, or like, people who like decide they need to be like tough or fronting it.
Right.
Why do you think that kind of culture is created in the prison system, and how do you replace kind of that gang culture with more constructive?
100% to survive. It's 100% to survive. I mean, a lot of it is, It depends on your point of view, I'm sure. But in my observation is that gang culture within the prison is to survive. There's a lot of it carries over from the streets through criminal activities and drug activities. But once people get inside, I think that there's comfort in numbers. I always ran by myself. I never was part of any kind of prison gang. That made it difficult for me to get out of general population sometimes, just trying to be an individual within that system. Primarily because I was born in Houston, Texas, and until I was 13, I was able to see a side of I was able to see a side of racism and be part of that weird kind of Southern. I'm going to kill for saying this, but that culture of racism, and not that it's not prevalent in California too, but and then to come to California where it's a really big melting pot, and to be in the East Bay and then eventually San Francisco, and be exposed to the big melting pot that is the Bay Area and San Francisco, and to see my way out of all that kind of like crazy racism stuff, and then when I started going to prison, I never wanted to go back to that stuff. So all that like infighting between races within prison always seemed stupid to me and crazy. I understood that people did it as a way to survive, but I was never going to let it kind of like take me back to like the culture that I understood from Houston, Texas, and so I was never part of any kind of like prison gang. I never let it, and there's a lot of pressure, especially as a young man at 19 years old. There was a lot of pressure for that kind of stuff, and I witnessed insane violence inside prison, and was there's race riots happen and all kinds of stuff like that happens, and fights happen, and you have to protect yourself, of course, but I was never going to let it affect me in that way again. And so I think the best way for people to be is to see each other all as human beings, right?
Yeah, I mean, of course you want to see each other as human beings. It just seems like when a culture becomes so prevalent, especially in the prison system, at least amongst the general population, it seems really hard. It's hard to uproot one system in order to replace it with something that's
yeah.
better.
You're not gonna stand on a soapbox in prison and say you guys have to change your ways. You
Right.
just have to. If you're going to be an individual, you're going to be kind of like, surround yourself with a couple other people who don't want to be involved in that. Put your backs to each other's back. Look out for each other, and pick a couple other strong people who don't want to be part of that. And you don't form your own gang, but you have your own little small community in there so you can survive. That kind of stuff. And I was always, I'm a big guy, so it was never hard for me to find other people who were strong-minded and who didn't want to be part of that stuff. I'm not saying the people who are part of that stuff aren't strong-minded or strong, but it just wasn't for me. So, I don't. Going back to what was your question again about that?
Oh, I'm curious, because like you mentioned, you can't just go on a soapbox and be like, we need to change our ways. Like, how do you change that mentality amongst like the general like prison population, really?
That is the age-long question. I don't know, other than having programs within the prison that teach you how to live out in society, teach you. I think AA works for a lot of folks. Having programs with people who come in from the streets who were prisoners. I'm not doing it as much now, but while I was at Delancey Street, we'd go into prison and talk to folks. And there's some Delancey Street's doing some work with Folsom Prison right now, where guys who are at Delancey Street who have been there for a while, who are getting a chance to go out and do some great things, get to go back to prison and talk to the guys about, hey, this is the life you're living right now. You don't have to live this way. This is what I'm doing. And I think it's a goal for me to be able to go back and do that kind of stuff. Speak to the guys once a year. I go up to Delancey Street has these big Christmas tree lots. So if you're ever in LA or San Francisco or Oakland, and you want a Christmas tree during Christmas, buy them from Delancey Street Christmas tree lot. And I'll go up there and buy Christmas trees and hang out with the guys up there and talk to them about how life can be after Delancey Street and to stick it out, because it's being at Delancey Street is really tough. I will tell you honestly, from an emotional and from a fixing your life point of view, Delancey Street was 1,000 times harder than prison, because in prison you don't have a choice. You're not going anywhere. But with the Delancey Street, you can walk out the door anytime you want. There's no guards, there's no cells, there's no gate. If you want to leave, you can leave. And it's really difficult to learn how to be a better person every single day. Not leaps and bounds, but incrementally,
Right.
how to be a better person every day.
Well, with that, I have basically, I think that we're coming near on time. So, like, one last question mainly, and that's, for the average person out there, when they see, like, how the prison system is, and they have the general perception of prisoners are, rather negative in the United States, with especially how large our incarcerated population. There's a lot of stigma with prisoners.
Right.
What do you want them to, consider or remember about? Let me give me a second to formulate this right, because
Sure.
I want to ask a good question to finish this off, and it's in my head, but I'm still trying to work it out exactly.
It's okay.
But what do you want people to remember about, like, the hardships that, like, people like you had to go through, going through the system and having to overcome them?
I don't know that I would want to phrase it that way. I would prefer to stick to the original subject that you guys reached out to me about, which is the incarcerated firefighters.
Okay. Yeah.
I hope that a larger group of people will think of them as heroes, so that they could think of themselves as heroes. The reason I made the comment on that New York Times post was because while I was a firefighter, I never felt like a slave. When I was in Pelican Bay State Prison as a structure firefighter there, because I was a wildland firefighter in Utah, I never felt like a slave. I was in there learning something new. I was learning how to be a better person. I was taking written tests and having to pass them. I was learning a new skill, seeing myself through a different lens. And that's what I would hope, is that people, that speaking to the smallest group, the people who just say, the most important group, the bigger group takes care of itself. The people who are like, have empathy for folks who go to prison. And I understand that there's lots of people who've been hurt by them, people who've been hurt by me. I stole people's cars, I stole people's properties. I understand the point of view is that you should be punished. And I did my time every time. I didn't try to get out of my time. I got in trouble. I went to prison. I did my time. I got back out. But I would employ people to remember that most people are going to get out. And if we don't teach people a different way to be, they're going to go back to being the person they were. And that person will hurt themselves, they'll hurt their families, and they'll hurt the community. And the only way we make that person a viable member, or not make that person, the only way we can help that person be a kind, honest, hardworking member of the community is by setting up programs so that they can be better. And regarding the firefighters, I would just say to remember that they are heroes. You can't imagine, unless you've done it, what backbreaking, insane work it is, not just for the inmates, but for civilians across the nation who are fighting wildfires every year. It is grueling, hard work, and people should appreciate them regardless what they've done.
I think that's an especially important and relevant message for today's times. Well, Brett Crawford, thank you very much for coming on to the Platoon podcast. I appreciate all your insights. Thank you very much, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you, brother.